Imagine strolling with your baby, only for a neighbor to block your path and insist you hand her over. Now imagine your husband, a trained Navy SEAL, is watching every move. Hand me that baby right now. The words cut through the quiet street like a slap. Simone Yarborough froze, clutching her newborn tighter against her chest. She had just been strolling down Sycamore Avenue in Chula Vista, trying to give her little girl a taste of fresh air after another restless night. The California sun was warm, the air smelled faintly of jasmine, and for a moment she had felt almost at peace. Until Patricia Grenville appeared. Patricia, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood and president of the Homeowners Association, stood in front of Simone like a wall. Her sunglasses reflected the young mother's shocked face back at her, her lips curled with impatience. "You can't just walk around with her like this," Patricia barked. "There are rules here." "I need to check she's safe. Hand her over." Simone's voice trembled. "She's my daughter. I don't need to hand her to anyone." Patricia tilted her head, as though Simone's words were a minor inconvenience. "This is an HOA community. Safety is our top concern. I have every right to inspect." Every syllable dripped with authority that nobody had granted her. The audacity made Simone's chest tighten, her hands automatically rocking her baby closer. She wanted to believe this was a mistake, that maybe Patricia was joking. But the woman's cold, hard expression told her otherwise. "I'm not giving you my baby," Simone said, firmer this time. That's when a low voice came from behind. "She doesn't need to repeat herself." Simone felt a wave of relief as her husband, Adrian Holtby, stepped closer. His presence alone shifted the air. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the calm confidence of someone who had faced down danger most people couldn't imagine, Adrian had been standing just a few feet back, letting Simone have her space. But Patricia's demand had crossed a line. Patricia's eyes flicked to him, then back to Simone. Her face pinched. "And who exactly are you to interrupt?" Adrian's voice stayed level. "Her husband, the father of that baby, and you're going to back away." The sidewalk suddenly felt like a stage, every house around them watching. Curtains twitched. A neighbor's front door opened slightly. Someone whispered. A phone camera caught the angle from across the street. Patricia didn't care. She crossed her arms and huffed. "I don't care who you are. We have rules. If your wife is walking with that child in this community, I need to verify things are being done correctly. If you've got nothing to hide, there shouldn't be a problem." Simone's stomach dropped. Was this really happening? Just days ago, she and Adrian had been excited to move into what they thought would be a peaceful neighborhood to raise their daughter. They'd chosen this area for its good schools and family-friendly reputation. Yet here she was, being told to hand her infant over like she was carrying contraband. Adrian stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Patricia. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The steadiness in his tone was enough to cut through her posturing. "No one touches my daughter. Not now. Not ever. You're done here." A silence followed. Even the faint rustle of leaves seemed to stop. Patricia's jaw twitched, but she didn't move. Simone felt her pulse hammering in her ears. Her arms ached from clutching the baby so tight, but she wasn't loosening her grip. She wanted to scream, to demand this woman explain herself, but the fear of what Patricia might do kept her frozen. Patricia leaned in, lowering her voice so only Simone and Adrian could hear. "If you don't cooperate, I'll call the board." And the police, Adrian let out a short laugh, not mocking, but stunned by her nerve. "Call whoever you want." "You won't get past me." "Behind them," a man on his porch muttered. "She's lost her mind." Another whispered, "That's crossing the line." The neighborhood was awake now, every set of eyes glued to the standoff. Simone swallowed hard. The baby stirred, whimpering at the tension radiating from the adults around her. She pressed her lips against her daughter's forehead, whispering softly, trying to shield her from the madness. Patricia's tone sharpened. "I'm the president of this HOA. If you two want to live here, you'd better learn how things work." Adrian's expression didn't change, but his words landed like steel. "I've lived through war zones. You think I'm worried about your HOA rules?" For the first time, Patricia blinked. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected resistance, certainly not from a man whose calm seemed carved. Neighbors were stepping closer now, some with their phones raised, recording everything. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. The authority she had always relied on wasn't working here. The balance of power was slipping, and she knew it. But instead of retreating, she doubled down. "If you refuse, I'll take this to the board immediately." "This isn't over." Adrian took another step forward, closing the distance just enough to make his point clear. "Yes, it is." Right now, the baby began to cry, the small, sharp wail cutting through the tension. Simone rocked her gently, her heart pounding. To understand why Patricia Grenville thought she had the authority to demand a mother's newborn, you have to know who she is, and more importantly, who she believes she is. Patricia wasn't born into power, but she had learned how to seize it in the places that mattered most to her. In her 20s, she worked as a real estate assistant, fetching coffee and making cold calls in Orange County. By her 40s, she'd married well, moved into an upscale development in Chula Vista, and found her identity in the one role nobody else wanted: HOA president. At first, neighbors saw her as a helpful organizer. She coordinated block parties, sent out newsletters, and reminded residents about trash pickup days. But the more power she tasted, the more she pushed. And people, not wanting to rock the boat, let her. "Rules are rules," she loved to say at meetings, tapping her stack of papers like a gavel. But her rules went far beyond lawn maintenance and paint colors. She once scolded a retired veteran for planting a tomato garden in his front yard, claiming vegetables clashed with the aesthetic. She ordered a single mom to move her daughter's trampoline because it didn't meet safety standards. She even tried to fine an elderly widow for feeding stray cats, arguing they were attracting undesirable wildlife. Behind closed doors, residents rolled their eyes. They whispered about Patricia's arrogance over backyard fences, exchanged knowing looks at meetings, and texted each other complaints when another condescending email landed in their inboxes. But still, nobody stopped her, until Simone and Adrian arrived. Patricia's first impression of the Yarborough-Holtby family was filtered through her prejudices. She noticed Simone's natural hair, her relaxed but stylish clothes, and the way she carried herself. Confident, unapologetic. Adrian, with his quiet authority, unsettled her even more. To Patricia, their presence wasn't just new, it was a disruption to the unspoken hierarchy she thought she controlled. She convinced herself she was only protecting the neighborhood. That was her story. But the truth was less flattering. Patricia craved dominance. And in her mind, demanding Simone hand over her baby wasn't outrageous. It was simply enforcing order. What Patricia didn't realize was that her actions weren't landing the way they used to. Residents had begun keeping score. A younger couple across the street, the Parks, had been fuming for months after Patricia ordered them to remove their wind chimes. Mr. Rodriguez, who lived on the corner, was still bitter over a fine he'd received for leaving his recycling bin out too long. And Mrs. Liu, a grandmother of 3, quietly resented the time Patricia reported her grandson for riding his bike too fast on the sidewalk. So when Patricia blocked Simone on the sidewalk that day, she wasn't just another HOA president laying down the law. She was a woman standing on the brittle foundation of years of unchecked behavior. Neighbors weren't just watching, they were waiting. At the time, though, Simone didn't know Patricia's history. To her, this was simply a confrontation with an unhinged stranger. Adrian, on the other hand, had already sensed Patricia's type the first week they moved in. He had spotted her standing at the end of their driveway, clipboard in hand, scribbling notes about their landscaping. "Don't let her get to you," he told Simone after that first encounter. "People like her need an audience. If you don't give them one, they lose." But Adrian underestimated how far Patricia would go. Her demand for the baby wasn't an isolated outburst. It was the culmination of years of conditioning. Patricia believed nobody would ever challenge her. She was the president, the enforcer, the final word. And even when the neighborhood whispered behind her back, they still played along. This time, however, things were different. Because Patricia wasn't facing a nervous retiree, a weary single mom, or a polite couple avoiding conflict. She was facing a mother fiercely protective of her newborn. and a husband whose calm exterior hid the experience of surviving missions in places Patricia couldn't pronounce. Still, Patricia wasn't the type to read the room. In her mind, she wasn't the one who looked unreasonable. She was saving face, maintaining order, proving that her authority extended even to the most sacred bond of all, a parent and child. It was twisted logic, but Patricia lived in a world where her own sense of control mattered more than anyone else's dignity, and as neighbors pieced together what had happened that day, something shifted. For the first time, Patricia's authority was publicly questioned. The whispers grew louder. The video clips began circulating. Her reign as unquestioned ruler of the cul-de-sac had taken a blow she couldn't brush off. But if Patricia was rattled, she wasn't about to retreat, and the next time she clashed with Simone and Adrian, it wouldn't be with words alone. Before the confrontation on Sycamore Avenue, Simone Yarborough and Adrian Holtby had been looking forward to a new chapter of peace. After years of moving around due to Adrian's military career, they had finally chosen Chula Vista, a city just south of San Diego, as the place to plant roots. The neighborhood promised quiet streets, good schools, and a sense of community. For Simone, it felt like the right place to start motherhood. For Adrian, it was supposed to be the calm after a decade of storms. Simone had grown up in Sacramento, the daughter of a librarian and a nurse. She was the kind of person who found joy in small rituals, brewing her morning coffee, watering her houseplants, reading late into the night with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. When she met Adrian through a mutual friend at a barbecue near Naval Base Coronado, she hadn't been looking for love. But there was something about his steady presence, the way he listened more than he spoke, that pulled her in. Adrian wasn't flashy. He didn't need to be. A Navy SEAL by trade, he had carried out missions in places that never made the news, and the weight of that experience lived behind his eyes. Yet at home, he was gentle. He loved cooking on Sundays, preferred jazz over television, and spent hours restoring an old motorcycle in the garage. Simone often joked that he could fix anything: leaky faucets, wobbly chairs, broken spirits. When their daughter, Ava, was born, Simone's world shifted completely. The exhaustion of late-night feedings was real, but so was the overwhelming love that left her in tears sometimes. She'd watch Ava sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling, and feel both terrified and grateful. Adrian, though equally exhausted, made it his mission to ease Simone's burdens where he could. He learned how to swaddle, how to rock Ava to sleep, how to read Simone's silences. The move to Chula Vista was supposed to give them stability. They had saved for years to buy the stucco 2-story house with the olive tree in the yard. The first night they slept there, Simone whispered, "We're finally home." Adrian kissed her forehead and said, "Yeah, we are." They were aware of the HOA before buying, but it seemed manageable. The realtor had described Patricia Grenville as involved, but Simone assumed that meant someone who organized bake sales and holiday lights competitions. Nobody warned them about Patricia's obsessive need for control. Still, in those first weeks, Simone tried to settle in with optimism. She joined a neighborhood moms group, took Ava on stroller walks, and struck up conversations with other parents at the park. Most people were warm and welcoming. Mrs. Liu had dropped off homemade dumplings. The park sent over a casserole. Even Mr. Rodriguez had offered to lend them his ladder when Adrian mentioned hanging curtains. But Patricia was different. From day one, she made herself known. She left a pamphlet of community expectations in their mailbox with highlighted passages. She cornered Simone in the driveway, asking pointed questions about their landscaping plans. And she had the gall to tell Adrian, "Military families usually rent, not buy. I hope you two understand the level of commitment this neighborhood requires." Adrian brushed it off at the time, telling Simone not to worry. "She thrives on control," he said. "As long as we do our thing, she can't touch us." Simone wanted to believe that. She wanted to think Patricia was just another nosy neighbor with too much time on her hands. But the incident with Ava shattered that illusion. For Adrian, the confrontation tapped into instincts he thought he had left behind overseas. In the military, you learn quickly how to read threats, subtle movements, tones of voice, shifts in posture. As soon as Patricia stepped into Simone's space and demanded the baby, every fiber of his being screamed danger. Not physical danger in the way he was trained to face, but something more insidious. A stranger's entitlement directed at his family. For Simone, the experience cracked open a vulnerability she had been trying to keep at bay. Motherhood already made her feel raw, exposed, responsible for a life she could never fully protect. To have someone question her right to hold her own child left her rattled in ways she couldn't put into words. In the days that followed, Simone replayed the moment in her head. Patricia's sunglasses reflecting her face, the audacity in her voice, the baby's cry cutting through the standoff. Each time she remembered, her chest tightened, and she felt the urge to retreat indoors, away from neighbors, away from judgment. But Adrian wouldn't let fear define their new life. This is our home. But Patricia wasn't the type to let go of control quietly, and the sidewalk standoff was only the beginning of a much bigger clash. The late morning sun was bright that day, but the atmosphere on Sycamore Avenue felt heavy. Simone stood rooted to the sidewalk, her daughter in her arms, while Patricia blocked her path like a guard dog unwilling to budge. What had begun as an irritating interruption was now spiraling into something dangerous. "I said hand her over," Patricia repeated, sharper this time, her voice carrying across the manicured lawns. "You can't just walk around here without proper clearance. We don't know if this child is even—" "Enough," Adrian cut in, stepping closer. His tone wasn't raised, but it had weight. "You don't finish that sentence." Patricia faltered, but only for a second. "Excuse me? You don't get to talk to me like that. I run this neighborhood. I have responsibilities. If you're hiding something, we'll find out." Simone felt her stomach lurch. She pressed her daughter against her shoulder, the baby's tiny fists tightening around her blouse. "Hiding something?" she shot back. "She's my daughter, born at Sharp Mary Birch Hospital just down the freeway. You want to see her birth certificate too?" Patricia's lip curled. "If that's what it takes, yes." The audacity of it hit Simone like a slap. "You're out of line," she whispered, her voice breaking, though anger quickly steadied it. Way out of line." Adrian took another step forward, now standing directly between Patricia and Simone. His presence alone seemed to pull the focus of everyone watching. He didn't square his shoulders aggressively, didn't raise his fists. He simply stood like a man who knew what he could do if pushed, and that was more than enough. Patricia, however, mistook his calm for weakness. "Don't try to intimidate me," she hissed, tilting her chin upward. "I know my rights." "Do you?" Adrian asked quietly. The silence that followed was thicker than the heat. Neighbors who had been whispering grew quiet, their phones steady in their hands. Mrs. Liu stood at the edge of her yard, clutching her gardening gloves. The Parks exchanged uneasy glances, their toddler peeking from behind their legs. Nobody dared step in, but nobody looked away either. Simone's hands trembled as she adjusted Ava, who was beginning to fuss from all the noise. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced her voice steady. "Patricia, I don't know what you think gives you the right to ask for my baby, but I'm telling you now, you're not touching her." Patricia scoffed. "I'm making sure this neighborhood stays safe. That's my job. People like you—" She caught herself, but the words had already slipped far enough to make the crowd bristle. Adrian's jaw clenched. He leaned just slightly forward, his voice low and firm. "Finish that sentence and you won't like where it goes." For the first time, Patricia's bravado cracked. Her face flushed, and she took half a step back, but her pride wouldn't let her retreat. She jabbed her finger toward Simone. "This is not how things are done here. You think you can waltz in and ignore the rules? I'll take this to the board, and you'll regret it." "Try it," Adrian said flatly. "I'll be waiting." The air was electric, charged with a tension that made even the neighbors feel trapped in the moment. Patricia's eyes darted from Adrian's steady stare to Simone's protective hold on her baby. For a second, it looked like she might lunge forward to snatch the child anyway. Simone tightened her grip, instinct screaming. "Don't you dare!" Adrian warned, his voice so calm it was almost chilling. Patricia froze. The command in his tone, measured, final, wasn't something she had ever encountered before. This wasn't a neighbor scolding her at a board meeting. This was a man who had walked through deserts and jungles, faced down enemies far more dangerous than an entitled HOA president. Patricia might not have known his resume, but she felt it in her bones. Adrian Holtby was not a man to be tested. The baby began to cry, loud and piercing, her small voice breaking the stalemate. Simone rocked her gently, tears stinging her eyes as she whispered, "It's okay, baby. Mummy's here." Patricia opened her mouth, but whatever she meant to say caught in her throat. She could feel the weight of the neighborhood's stares. For the first time in years, she wasn't the authority figure commanding obedience. She was the one being judged. Adrian finally spoke again, his words final. "You're done here, Patricia. Go home." Her nostrils flared. "This isn't over." "Maybe not," Adrian replied. "But today, it's finished." Patricia stood there for another beat, trembling with frustration, before spinning on her heel. Her shoes clicked hard against the pavement as she stormed back toward her house. The crowd remained silent, eyes tracking her every step. Simone exhaled shakily, pressing her cheek against Ava's head. Adrian placed a steady hand on her back, grounding her. By the time Patricia stormed back toward her house, the quiet block had transformed into something closer to a stage. What started as a tense triangle between Patricia, Simone, and Adrian had now drawn nearly a dozen onlookers. Curtains fluttered as faces peered out from windows. Garage doors cracked open just enough for neighbors to catch a view. Phones were out, red record buttons glowing. This wasn't just a spat between residents. It was a spectacle. Mrs. Liu stood at the edge of her driveway, still wearing her wide-brimmed sun hat and gardening gloves. She had paused in the middle of trimming her roses, staring in disbelief. Her lips pressed tight, but her eyes darted between Simone and Adrian as though silently offering them support. Across the street, the Parks, Dylan and Jay, had taken their toddler inside but returned themselves, hovering on the sidewalk with folded arms. Dylan whispered, "She finally snapped," to his wife, who only shook her head. They had their own history with Patricia, a long argument about the noise pollution of their wind chimes. Mr. Rodriguez leaned against his porch railing, muttering under his breath, "Same old Patricia." Always taking it too far. He fumbled with his phone, trying to record while keeping the screen angled discreetly. Even teenagers from 2 houses down had slipped out, their skateboards abandoned in the grass as they gawked at the confrontation. One of them whispered, "This is going viral, man. HOA psycho loses it." But Simone wasn't paying attention to them. Her entire body was focused on Ava, who was still crying, the sound slicing through the tension like glass breaking. She bounced her baby gently, whispering reassurances, though her own voice trembled. The adrenaline had her hands shaking, and she hated that Patricia had reduced her to this state, afraid in front of her own home. Adrian, on the other hand, had noticed every single witness. He didn't mind the cameras. In fact, part of him welcomed them. Patricia thrived in shadows, in closed-door meetings where she could bully people without consequence. Here, on a bright sidewalk with the world watching, she had exposed herself. When Patricia turned back halfway to her house, as though debating whether to make one more power move, the murmurs around her grew louder. "Don't do it," Dylan muttered, though not loud enough for her to hear. "She's embarrassing herself," Jay added, shaking her head. Patricia's eyes swept over the spectators. The realization set in. She wasn't just fighting Simone anymore. She was performing, and the crowd wasn't on her side. "You all saw this!" Patricia shouted suddenly, gesturing at Simone. She refused a reasonable request. She disrespected the rules of this community. The audacity of framing herself as the victim made several people exchange glances. Mrs. Liu muttered softly in Mandarin, something that made her shake her head and purse her lips. Mr. Rodriguez laughed bitterly. "Quest. Since when is asking for someone's baby reasonable?" Adrian, standing with arms loose at his sides, spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "My wife was walking with our daughter. That's it. Nothing more. And this woman decided she had the right to put her hands where they don't belong. That's not rules. That's harassment," Simone, though rattled, found her voice too. "You don't get to demand my baby." she said, her tone sharp. I don't care what title you give yourself. You don't have that power. Patricia's face darkened. Her confidence wavered, but she pressed on, desperate not to lose control in front of the neighborhood. You're twisting this. I was protecting us. Don't we all care about safety? No one answered. The silence was damning. Patricia scanned the crowd, searching for a nod of support, but found none. Finally, Dylan spoke up. There's safety. And then there's whatever this is. You crossed a line. The air shifted. Patricia's shoulders stiffened, as though the betrayal of silence from her neighbors cut deeper than any insult. For years she had ruled with intimidation, notes, fines, threats, and people had gone along because it was easier than pushing back. But now, people were speaking, people were recording, and she could feel her authority slipping. Adrian took Simone's elbow gently, guiding her a step back toward their house. His voice lowered, meant for her alone. We're done here. Let's go inside. Simone nodded, though her eyes lingered on Patricia. She wanted to say more, to call out the entitlement dripping from every word Patricia had spoken. But Ava's crying made the decision for her. Protect the baby first. Everything else could wait. As they turned, Patricia shouted after them, her words breaking with frustration. You can't just walk away. You'll regret this. Adrian didn't flinch. He didn't turn. He only called back over his shoulder. We'll regret nothing. The neighborhood stayed still until the couple disappeared into their home. Only then did the whispers resume, heavier this time, rippling through the crowd. Patricia stood alone on the sidewalk, red-faced, trembling, realizing she had lost not just a battle, but her grip on the entire neighborhood. But losing control didn't make her give up. It made her more dangerous, and her next move would push the conflict past the point of no return. For 2 days after the confrontation, the neighborhood was restless. Videos of Patricia's sidewalk showdown with Simone and Adrian circulated in private group chats. Some clips even made it to Facebook community boards. The comments were brutal. She's gone too far this time. Who demands someone's baby? That's insane. Finally caught on camera. About time people see how she acts. Patricia read every word. Each one felt like acid burning through her pride. For years, she had wielded the HOA title like armor, immune to criticism. But now, people were laughing. People were calling her dangerous. She wasn't the enforcer anymore. She was the punchline. Her fury grew, and by the third evening, Patricia snapped. It was just before dusk when Simone decided to take Ava on another walk, hoping the fresh air would calm the baby's restlessness. Adrian urged her to wait until morning, but Simone didn't want fear to trap her inside. If I stop walking with her, Patricia wins, she said softly, strapping Ava into a stroller. Adrian finally agreed, though he stayed close, walking a few paces behind with his hands tucked in his pockets. They had barely made it down the block when Patricia emerged from her driveway. No sunglasses this time, no clipboard, just raw anger carved into her face. You think you can humiliate me? She barked, her voice echoing. You think you can turn this neighborhood against me? Simone froze, gripping the stroller's handle tighter. Patricia, please. We're not doing this again. But Patricia was already striding toward them, her shoes striking the pavement with purpose. You don't get to defy me. You don't get to make me look like a fool. Adrian stepped forward, moving between Simone and Patricia like a reflex. His stance was calm, but there was steel in his eyes. You need to back away. Right now, Patricia's hands curled into fists at her sides. Or what? You'll scare me with your tough talk? Adrian's voice stayed even. I don't need to scare you. You're doing that to yourself. The neighbors were watching again. Doors cracked open, heads peeked out. A teenager whispered, Here we go, as his phone began recording. Patricia stopped only a foot away from Adrian, her face inches from his chest. She wasn't tall, but the venom in her expression tried to make up for it. You don't belong here, she hissed. People like you don't get to waltz into this community and rewrite the rules. Simone gasped. Enough. Stop talking to us like that. We pay the same dues as everyone else. We bought our home just like you did. We belong here as much as anyone. Patricia's eyes snapped to Simone, and something in her expression shifted, recklessness taking over reason. She lunged, reaching for the stroller handle. "Then prove it! Let me see that baby!" The motion was quick, but Adrian was quicker. His hand shot out, clamping down on Patricia's wrist before she could touch the stroller. His grip was firm but controlled, the kind of restraint honed from years of training. He didn't squeeze hard enough to hurt, but enough to freeze her in place. "Don't ever put your hands on my family," he said, his voice low, carrying enough force to silence the entire street. Patricia's face twisted with shock. For the first time, she looked uncertain, her confidence cracking under Adrian's unyielding gaze. She yanked her arm back, stumbling half a step, and the neighbors watching audibly gasped. Simone pulled the stroller closer, her breath shaking. She bent down to soothe Ava, who had begun crying at the sudden commotion. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady enough for her daughter. Patricia staggered back, pointing a shaking finger at Adrian. You assaulted me!" Adrian didn't flinch. "No, I stopped you from assaulting my wife and child. Everyone here saw what you did." The crowd murmured in agreement. Someone called out, "We got it on video." Another added, "She reached first." Patricia's chest heaved as she looked around, realizing the audience wasn't hers anymore. They weren't nodding along with her accusations. They were siding with the family she had tried to humiliate. "You'll regret this," she spat, though the words lacked their former bite. Adrian took a step forward, not aggressive. Neighbors exchanged looks, some shaking their heads, others nodding in quiet respect toward Adrian and Simone. For the first time, it felt like the community saw Patricia for who she truly was, and saw Adrian for the protector he had always been. But even in defeat, Patricia's obsession with control didn't fade. It twisted into something darker, and the aftermath would shake the neighborhood even harder. When Patricia stormed off that evening, the street didn't fall back into its usual rhythm. Instead, it buzzed with an energy that was equal parts disbelief and relief. People lingered outside, trading looks, trading words, and trading recordings of what they had just witnessed. Mr. Rodriguez crossed his arms, shaking his head slowly. "Did you see that?" She went for the stroller. "The stroller? Who does that?" Dylan Park muttered back. "She's lost it. Completely lost it." His wife, Jay, standing beside him, added, "It's not just today. This has been building for years. People are finally seeing it." Mrs. Liu, who usually stayed quiet at HOA meetings, finally spoke. "That woman has embarrassed herself, but worse. She scared the baby. That's not forgivable." Her words carried weight, and several neighbors nodded in agreement. The teenagers who had been filming were already uploading clips online. One of them laughed nervously. "This is gonna blow up, man. HOA president attacks a baby. The internet's gonna eat this alive." Simone didn't hear any of it. She was too focused on Ava, still crying in her stroller, little fists waving in distress. Kneeling beside her, Simone whispered lullabies under her breath, rocking the stroller gently until the cries softened into hiccups. Her own eyes were wet, though she tried to blink it away before anyone noticed. Adrian stood guard, not speaking, not moving, just scanning the circle of neighbors with the steady vigilance of someone who'd spent years making sure no threat slipped past him. He didn't care about the gossip or the cameras. His focus was on the trembling in Simone's hands, the redness in her eyes, and the baby's distress. Finally, he spoke quietly. "Let's get you both inside." Simone hesitated. Part of her wanted to retreat, to hide behind their front door where Patricia's words couldn't reach. But another part, the part that hated feeling small, wanted to stay and confront the crowd herself. She wanted them to know she wasn't weak, that she wasn't just some mother to be pitied. But Adrian knew the toll. He gently touched her arm. "Not tonight. Tonight we take care of Ava. That's all that matters." She nodded reluctantly, pushing the stroller forward. As they walked toward their driveway, the neighbors parted like a tide, some murmuring support. "We've got your back," Dylan said softly. Jay added, "You didn't deserve any of that." Mrs. Liu even reached out, lightly squeezing Simone's shoulder with a sympathetic glance. Patricia's house loomed only 3 doors down. The blinds were drawn, the porch light flicked on, and the faint slam of a door echoed through the street. Everyone knew she was inside, seething, probably drafting an email or plotting her next move. When Simone and Adrian reached their front door, Adrian paused and looked back. His eyes met Dylan's for a brief moment. Dylan gave a short nod, an acknowledgement, not of defeat, but of solidarity. For once, Patricia wasn't the only voice in the room. Inside, Simone collapsed onto the couch with Ava in her arms. She rocked the baby gently, whispering, "You're safe. You're safe," over and over. Her voice cracked, betraying her exhaustion. Adrian sat beside her, resting a hand on her knee. "You did nothing wrong," he told her. Simone let out a bitter laugh. "I couldn't even stand up to her. You had to step in again. You were protecting Ava," Adrian said firmly. "That's standing up. Don't twist it." Simone looked at him, eyes shining. She looked at me like I wasn't even a mother, like I didn't deserve her. "Do you know how that feels?" Adrian exhaled slowly. He did know, at least in his own way. He had seen arrogance, entitlement, and prejudice in 1,000 different forms, on foreign soil and back home. But hearing it in Simone's voice was different. It cut deeper. "You don't need her validation," he said finally. "Ava knows who her mother is, and I know. That's all that matters." Outside, the neighborhood didn't disperse quickly. People stood around in clusters, murmuring about what had just happened. For the first time, they weren't afraid to say Patricia's name out loud in criticism. "She can't keep her position after this," Jay whispered. "She'll try," Dylan replied. "Then maybe it's time we finally push back," Mrs. Liu said firmly, surprising everyone with her sudden boldness. The seed was planted. Patricia's iron grip on the HOA wasn't as unshakable as she thought. The neighborhood had seen her stripped of her composure, her authority collapsing in the face of a family she had tried to intimidate. But Simone, rocking Ava to sleep, didn't know any of that yet. All she felt was the weight of the encounter pressing on her chest. Patricia didn't sleep the night after the sidewalk confrontation. She sat at her kitchen table, a half-finished glass of Chardonnay, sweating onto the wood, her laptop glowing with tabs open to HOA bylaws and community regulations. Her fingers tapped furiously against the keys as she drafted email after email, each one more defensive than the last. She had convinced herself that if she could spin the story fast enough, she could take back control. By morning, every homeowner in the community had received a 3-page message titled, "Clarification of events for the safety of our neighborhood." In it, Patricia painted herself as the protector of the community. She claimed Simone had been walking improperly with her infant, and that she had intervened with safety in mind. She described Adrian as threatening, accusing him of physical aggression toward an HOA official. The reaction wasn't what she expected. Within minutes, the replies started trickling in. Mr. Rodriguez fired back first. "I was standing on my porch, Patricia. I saw everything. Don't lie to us." Jay Park responded next. "We have video. You reached for their stroller. That's not safety. That's harassment." Even Mrs. Liu, who rarely spoke in public forums, hit reply all. "A baby's cry is not a threat to this neighborhood. Your actions were—" The email thread exploded, neighbors piling on, some attaching screenshots of videos already circulating online. Patricia had tried to control the narrative, but the evidence was against her. Still, she refused to back down. At the next HOA meeting, held in the community clubhouse, Patricia arrived early, armed with binders, highlighted notes, and a self-righteous fire burning behind her eyes. She positioned herself at the head of the long table as though nothing had changed. The room filled quickly. More residents than usual showed up, some curious, others angry. Simone and Adrian arrived quietly, slipping into seats near the back. Simone clutched Adrian's hand under the table, her pulse racing. She hated being here, hated the spotlight, but she knew avoiding it would only give Patricia more ground. Patricia opened the meeting with her usual tone, clipped and authoritative. "I'd like to begin tonight by addressing the rumors circulating about me." Groans rippled through the room. Dylan muttered under his breath. "Here we go." Patricia launched into her rehearsed speech. "On Tuesday, I acted in my capacity as HOA president to ensure the well-being of our community. Unfortunately, a misunderstanding occurred when I attempted to confirm the safety of a child. Certain individuals chose to misinterpret my actions, and— Misinterpret? Mr. Rodriguez cut in. You tried to grab a woman's baby. That's not interpretation. That's fact. Laughter broke out, though it wasn't friendly. Patricia's face flushed. I was enforcing safety rules, she snapped. There is no rule about inspecting babies. Mrs. Liu said firmly, her voice carrying more weight than Patricia expected. You humiliated that family. You frightened the child. You embarrassed all of us, Patricia tried to cut her off. Mrs. Liu, with respect— No, Mrs. Liu interrupted, her voice sharp. With respect to you, I've lived here 20 years. I've followed your rules, even when they were ridiculous. But this crossed the line. The room erupted in murmurs of agreement. Simone squeezed Adrian's hand tighter, her chest tightening with a mix of fear and relief. She had dreaded being the subject of this meeting, but watching the neighbors speak up, she realized they weren't against her. For once, Patricia wasn't untouchable. Adrian finally spoke, his voice calm but cutting. We moved here to raise our daughter in peace. That's all. And in the span of 2 weeks, the president of this HOA demanded my wife hand over our newborn on the street. That isn't leadership, that's harassment. Patricia bristled. You threatened me. You put your hands on me. You reached for my child. Adrian replied evenly. And I stopped you. Ask anyone here who saw it. Better yet, watch the videos. Several neighbors nodded, some even pulling out their phones as if ready to hit play right then and there. The room shifted. Patricia looked around, desperate for someone, anyone, to back her up. But where she had once found silent obedience, she now saw crossed arms, shaking heads, and stony stares. Her voice cracked. I was only doing my job. No, Jay said flatly. You were abusing it. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's binder lay unopened in front of her, useless now. Patricia's reign had been built on silence, and that silence had finally shattered. Patricia ended the meeting abruptly, her voice tight. We'll revisit this at the next session. She gathered her binders and stormed out, her heels clacking against the clubhouse floor. The neighbors stayed behind, talking, some approaching Simone and Adrian directly. We're sorry you went through that, Dylan said. She's been out of control for years. You just happened to be the one who finally exposed it. Simone managed a small smile. I didn't want to expose anything. In the days after the HOA meeting, the neighborhood shifted in subtle but unmistakable ways. Conversations that once stayed behind closed doors now spilled onto sidewalks, porches, and driveways. Patricia's behavior had cracked something open, something residents had been holding back for years. Simone noticed it first on a quiet afternoon when Mrs. Liu knocked on her door. She stood holding a Tupperware of dumplings, her eyes kind. For you and the baby, she said softly. Simone accepted the dish with gratitude, though she could tell this wasn't just about food. Patricia embarrassed herself, Mrs. Liu added, her voice low. But she also embarrassed us. We let her do this for too long. I should have spoken sooner. Simone felt her throat tighten. It's not your fault. She singled us out. Mrs. Liu shook her head. She singled out everyone. You were just the first to stop her. That same evening, Dylan and Jay stopped by. Dylan leaned against the fence, sighing heavily. We've been quiet for years, just letting her run the show. I regret it now. She fined us for those wind chimes, remember? We should have pushed back then. Maybe it wouldn't have gotten this far, Adrian, standing beside Simone, replied evenly. Bullies only thrive when people let them. The moment someone says no, their power starts to shrink. Jay nodded slowly. She's not just a bully, though. She targeted you because you're different. And that's the part we don't like admitting out loud. The words hung in the air. Simone shifted uncomfortably, glancing down at Ava sleeping in her arms. She had felt it too. The sting of being scrutinized more closely than others. The double standard in Patricia's demands. I knew the moment she looked at me, Simone admitted quietly. It wasn't about rules, it was about control. And about me. Adrian rested a hand on her shoulder, steady but silent. He had seen prejudice in countless forms, both blatant and subtle. None of it surprised him anymore, but it always angered him. "We can't change Patricia," Adrian finally said, his voice calm but firm. "But we can change how we respond. You all have more power than you think." That struck a chord. Over the next week, neighbors began to talk openly in ways they never had. At the park, parents traded stories of Patricia's pettiness, letters about too many Halloween decorations, warnings about unsanctioned birthday parties, fines for leaving lawn chairs on porches. Each story carried the same thread: fear of standing up to her. And now, one by one, that fear was crumbling. One night, Simone found herself sitting on her porch with Mrs. Liu and Jay, the baby monitor resting on the table beside her. The conversation drifted to something deeper than HOA disputes. "I grew up in Fresno," Mrs. Liu said, staring out at the darkened street. "My parents always told me to keep my head down, not make trouble. That's how we survived. But when I saw her grab for your stroller, Simone, I realized silence doesn't keep us safe. It just makes room for more Patricia Grenvilles." Jay nodded. "My parents immigrated from South Korea. Same lesson. Stay invisible, stay safe. But watching you and Adrian stand your ground, it made me realize we've been teaching our daughter the wrong thing. She needs to know it's okay to say no." Simone felt tears prick her eyes. She hadn't set out to make a statement. She had just wanted to protect her child. But now, she saw how her refusal had rippled outward, giving others permission to speak, too. Adrian joined them midway through the conversation, sitting quietly until he finally said, "In my line of work, you learn something simple. Fear spreads faster than courage. But once courage shows up, even a little, it spreads too. You don't need an army to change things. Sometimes you just need one person to say enough." The women nodded, letting his words settle. Meanwhile, Patricia stayed holed up in her house. Her blinds stayed shut, her car rarely moved. But she wasn't finished. Residents could feel it. Her pride was too great to let go. Rumors swirled that she was preparing some kind of retaliation. Still, the community's tone had shifted. Where once people whispered about Patricia in frustration, now they spoke with resolve. The HOA meeting hadn't just humiliated her, it had empowered everyone else. Simone, though, was still healing. Late at night, when Ava cried and she walked the hallway to soothe her, the memory of Patricia's outstretched hand haunted her. She felt guilt, fear, and anger tangled together. But then she'd glance at Adrian, asleep on the couch after another long day, his arm draped protectively over the baby's blanket, and she remembered why they fought to stay. This was their home, and no one, no matter how entitled, was going to take that from them. But Patricia's silence wasn't surrender. The showdown came sooner than anyone expected. Patricia called for an emergency HOA session just 10 days after the stroller incident. Residents were weary, but curiosity and tension filled the air as people filed into the community clubhouse. No one wanted to miss what felt like the climax of a neighborhood drama that had spilled far beyond property lines. Simone and Adrian debated whether to go. Simone's stomach knotted at the thought of facing Patricia again, but Adrian insisted on being there. "She's counting on fear keeping us quiet," he said. "We won't give her that satisfaction." The clubhouse was packed. Folding chairs lined the walls. Some people even stood in the back, phones at the ready. Patricia sat at the head table, papers stacked high in front of her, her hair perfectly styled, though the tightness in her jaw betrayed her nerves. She cleared her throat. "This meeting is to address recent events and restore order in our community." Mr. Rodriguez let out a sharp laugh. "Order? You mean your order?" Patricia ignored him. "Certain residents have chosen to spread lies and distort the truth of my actions. I will not allow this neighborhood to be poisoned by slander." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Simone gripped Adrian's hand, her pulse racing. Patricia pressed on, voice rising. "I acted within my rights as HOA president. If we allow people to break rules without consequences, this community will fall apart. And if anyone here can't respect that, perhaps they don't belong in this neighborhood." That last sentence hit like a stone. The room erupted. "You can't say that!" Jay shouted. "You went after a baby!" Mrs. Liu added fiercely. Enough is enough, Patricia, Dylan said, standing to his feet. We're done being bullied. The wave of voices rose until Patricia slammed her hand on the table. Quiet! You will not speak to me this way. That was the breaking point. Adrian stood slowly, his voice calm but carrying across the room. We're not speaking to you, Patricia. We're speaking for ourselves, for our families, for our children. We bought our homes, we live here, and we won't be ruled by fear anymore. The crowd hushed. Every eye turned to Adrian, his steady figure commanding the room without effort. Simone rose beside him, her voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with each word. I came here hoping to raise my daughter in peace. Instead, I was humiliated and threatened by the very person who was supposed to represent us. You don't get to tell me I don't belong. None of us belong to you. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then louder, filling the clubhouse. Patricia's face flushed crimson as she scrambled through her papers, desperate to regain control. But the tide had turned. Mr. Rodriguez stood. I move to vote Patricia out as HOA president. The words sent a shockwave through the room. Patricia's mouth opened in disbelief. You can't. Yes, we can, Jay cut in. It's in the bylaws. Majority vote. Hands shot up. Dozens, nearly everyone in the room. Patricia's protest drowned under the sea of voices. Aye. When the vote was counted, it wasn't even close. Patricia Grenville was officially removed from her position. She sat frozen, eyes wide, as if the foundation of her identity had been ripped away in seconds. Without her title, without the shield of authority, she was just another neighbor, one whose actions had cost her the respect of the very people she had ruled. Patricia gathered her things silently, her heels clicking as she stormed out. This time, no one followed, no one offered sympathy. The door slammed, and the room erupted in cheers. Simone sat back down, breathless, tears welling in her eyes. Adrian squeezed her hand gently. It's done, he whispered, but Simone shook her head. No, it's just beginning. We have a chance to build something better now. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood changed. Meetings became collaborative instead of combative. People volunteered to organize family events, community cleanups, and barbecues. Patricia's downfall wasn't just about rules or power. It was about dignity, respect, and the strength of ordinary people saying no to entitlement. And that's a lesson worth carrying far beyond Sycamore Avenue. If you found yourself pulled into this story, take a moment to think about the communities you're part of, your neighborhood, your workplace, even your family. Sometimes all it takes is one voice, one refusal, to shift the balance. Don't be afraid to be that voice. And if this story struck a chord, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this. Stories that remind us that standing up, even in small moments, can change lives.